Welcome to Katalyzing Conversations. I'm Jahara, founder and CEO of Katalyst Labs. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Ms. Sima Kamil, the Deputy Governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. Hi, Sima. Good to have you with us.
Hey, hi, Jahara. It's good to be here. Always lovely to meet.
Shall we dive right in?
Of course.
Okay, so tell us what Sima Kamil was like growing up. Things you enjoyed doing as a child, your passions, your ambition.
Okay. Actually, if you ask me, as a child, I was a introvert. I was a quiet child, and almost shy. So it's been a journey, actually. What did I like doing? We had a family, my parents and a brother, who believed very much in giving children every opportunity
Right.
that presented themselves. So and particularly my father was heavily into reading, and so was my mother actually. And their big thing was that we should just open in our minds to whatever presents itself. So it was very common for us and in the wider family just to have lots of discussions and debates on anything and everything. And my father's thing was that, you take us to a bookshop. My brother and I, was about a year and a bit younger than me, and say, okay, buy whatever you like.
Wow.
So just, and they never even said, this is the kind of books you may or may not buy. And we may have been 6 or 7. And I think that was the big thing in our life, reading. Reading was the big thing, whether it was just Archie comics or anything that we wanted to read, or the books that he had. My brother was a bigger one. He would read encyclopedias, so he had a sponge mind. So that's what I enjoyed reading. I didn't.
No sports, no,
I
interest
was
in
not,
technology, maybe.
not into sport. I was not into sports. I was made to be musical. I wasn't really musical, but my mother said, okay, you must learn to play the piano and you must. She would like to push me in sports more, but I was not. And so I was, as I said, I didn't, and I had few good friends rather than a lot of, a lot of friends, a few very good intimate friends, and very close to family and cousins and that. So that was the other thing that we enjoyed, was being, in the larger family. Sporty at all.
Okay.
Wouldn't say that I had any particular, like you might have a hobby. I thought I was sort of had to have a hobby, so I collected coins, but it wasn't really a passion. If you
So
really
what
like
made
to
you
do
choose?
to read.
So what then made you choose finance as a profession? Because nothing in your early years sort of, except for the coin collection, which didn't quite work out. So
Yes. So that's interesting. I was not born with a passion to be a banker. And I think even when I finished my O levels, A levels, and a little bit of college here, I wanted to go and study abroad. And I just wanted to go abroad for the independence of it, right? And the family again was very supportive, but the family was not very well off. So they said, okay, you can go abroad and study, and we will have to sacrifice for you to do that. But it must be something that is going to generate you some income, right? So my first wish would have been to study literature, or later on development economics or history. Well, that's what was my natural inclination. But they said, no, you're not going to get a job with that. So you better study business. So I
right.
studied business. So when I came back from university in the UK, I then said, okay, now what should I do? And I applied to banks. And they were and that's how it started, really. So it was not a ambition. I didn't say I want to be an investment banker. I want to, in those days that was the in thing. It wasn't like that. So I almost fell into it, really.
Okay.
Honest.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of people do. Yeah.
Do that.
So
Yes.
Was there anyone who was an inspiration to you in your early years, and why, if there was somebody like that?
Yeah, well, my own, it was mostly family, shall I say? In the early years of, you're saying before I began working, right?
Yeah. Or even after. I mean, there
Okay.
must have been someone that you looked up to, or
Yeah,
someone,
so well, in my earlier years, it was my mother and my aunt, who was a very independent woman, and who became a very successful doctor. In
okay.
fact, I wish that I should have been a doctor, but then I didn't want to do that either.
Right.
So, and then later on, when I got into banking, there were a couple of men who I still have enormous respect for, and I'm happy to name them. One was a person who headed Greenlace Bank, Azhar Hamid, who then became a ombudsman and so on.
Yes. Yes.
My boss at HBL, Zakir Mahmood, who, you know, what I would say is integrity along with um, dignity as well as professional acumen, teaching you more more than the techniques of banking.
Okay.
There's more to
Yeah.
banking than techniques. It's about people. You know, one of the things Azhar taught me was have to say no to customers a lot in banking.
Right.
Uh, you have to say no. And one of his lessons to me was um, you have to say no and retain the friendship. Otherwise, you're not a banker. So it's those kinds of people that inspired me, in which I would sit in a meeting and look at and say, okay, I need to be like them. So that
Good.
those
Good. So tell me, you've had a stellar career in one of the most male-dominated fields in Pakistan. So tell us a little more about your journey. Were there some highs and lows? What kept you going all these decades? Because now you've been in banking for what, 30 years?
more than that, more than that.
Okay.
Um, so what kept me going, honestly, was that it allowed me, as I said, I was a shy child. And in school and so on, I would be one of those who were quiet. And so I never saw myself as becoming successful. And what happened was that I got opportunities um, to learn to become confident. And most of all, I think what kept me going was that it was just so much fun. Everything
Banking
was,
was fun.
yes, it was fun.
Somehow that's
It
difficult for me
sounds,
to absorb.
I know it is, but it was being with people, being able to achieve something, and that really um, is the fun piece. To me, I was very fortunate. I always had people who gave me great opportunities, and and my family never thought that this is a woman and she can't do this. So I got up one day. They said, "Okay, go to Lahore," and I was not married at the time, and I just said yes, and then I went. And then they said, "Okay, let's go to Australia." This was in Greenlace, again alone, and I did that. And so banking on the outside looks very dull, but it if you're willing to take risks in your career, it becomes fun. And then you are able to get on with people, and the experience, even now, every day is fun, and every day is entirely different. And that's what I enjoyed. And then I enjoyed the success, of course. Success is its own impetus, right? It gives you, I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
It makes, it's a high in itself. um, and not, I don't think I'm competitive with people, but I compete with my own self.
That's the
So
best way to be competitive,
yes,
actually, with
yes.
yourself.
So that is you're saying, so I think women have that also, in the sense that they always underrate themselves. So even now, if I think I've done something well, I still am, well, I think to myself it could have been better, so that's what's kept me going. There are highs and lows, obviously. There are people that you have, bosses sometimes that you have are difficult. You have, but it's never really, other than right in the beginning when I faced more challenges, right in the beginning when I first came back. One was coming back from the UK and adjusting back to Pakistan, living with your family again. That's tough sometimes. The lack of quote unquote independence, becomes difficult. And also there was a degree of women didn't get treated in the same way in my early years. And that was clear to me. And I found that hard to cope with. Um, there was clearly discrimination.
How did
At
you
that.
handle that? Because that's still the case for many young women who start out, although things are definitely better. So how did you handle that? Because they
Well,
could learn.
first, I was very young and quite idealistic. So the way I encountered it was my very first job when I came back from university. And within 2 weeks, I found out that I was being paid less than the men in the same, management, what they call management trainees. And I went and confronted the country head of that bank. And he said, well, you're going to get married, you leave, we're investing this in you, And he
Yeah.
actually, now you can't say it. In those days, you could say it. And he said that. And I just, because I was hot-headed in the days, I just resigned. I just
Wow.
walked out. So many women don't have that opportunity. And I was lucky enough that I could go home and say, well, this is what I've done. I'm not staying. And I wrote it in a letter and sent it to him. So then after that, you start handling things in a more, shall we say, in a way that's more, I don't like to use the word diplomatic, but in a way that actually understands that when women come into any position, you're tested by men. Yeah? And most roles I've had, even when you go to senior positions, they test you. They want to know, because they're not used to it sometimes. They're just not used to a woman boss, say. And then they test you for a while. And then after a while, I think respect works. If you give
Right.
it, no.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that successful women like you can relate to that. You understand that. There is a initial hesitancy. And then I think once they become comfortable, it kind of tends to fade. And once they also realize that you're competent,
So,
perhaps
but
you're,
leading on from this, so have you faced resistance as a leader, the men that you've led? Is that also a difficult
only, I
thing?
would say, in every new role that I got into, the resistance was, shall we say, it was not explicit, it was sort of implied, and a little bit, but that resistance was easily overcome. I honestly did not find it a very big problem, largely because perhaps a lot of the people, and this is all in Pakistan, and very conservative people, and the job that I most enjoyed, I think, was when I was dealing with about 2,000 branches I was responsible for in a big bank. Um, and there were all kinds of people in all kinds of places. And yet, once you're talking to them and once they understand that you're listening, you listen to them, you relate to them, you don't run down their values or you don't run down their position in any way, and you respect it, I think it goes away. But yes,
Yeah,
there's
it's two
resistance, but
ways.
it's kind of overt and it continues. Um, but eventually I think I was able to win people over, not by just being a walkover, but by actually being a friend too when somebody needs a friend, listening, but then also taking the responsibility if things go wrong. I think that's very important.
So would you describe that as your leadership style? Because that was one of the questions that I was going to ask you, how you
Yes,
would describe your leadership style. So I think you
it's
just
very,
did.
yeah, it's kind of informal. I listen a lot, and if there's a group of people and they're talking, I let them, even if they're not necessarily concerned, I let them go on, and then I keep listening if it's a group, and then I will try to draw it together and then take the call. And I think that keeps people, it's very important for people to have build collaborative teams. And I
Right.
think that that's my style. But I think the style is best asked from people who report to you than yourself.
That's true. Perhaps
Yeah,
I'll do that.
yes,
So
that's
tell
right.
me, work-life balance is something that a lot of women struggle with. How have you
Yes.
managed to balance your work and your other responsibilities, your family, your social life, all of that?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that it takes a toll. It takes a toll for women, especially. Um, and because the responsibilities at home remain. My husband's a lawyer, and he's my advisor. He's my best friend, but also still has expectations of me as a homemaker, right? So often he will still, when I go home, he sent me a message just now a little while ago saying, when are you coming home? I've got home, and stuff like, what's for dinner? but he but I have to fix that. So on the morning on the way to work, I do have to call the cook and tell him what he has to cook for dinner, right? And ensure that there's balance between what my mother-in-law wants and what somebody else wants. So
Right.
yes, it's a daily balance. It's a daily exercise. There's guilt always. Um, but I think we need to get away from trying to be the perfect woman, right? And then make your choices. And every day you choose, right? Some days you may choose not to answer the phone at midnight, and on other days you will. Um, and um, but this woman who's the perfect wife, mother, um, career woman, and therefore should be able to do all of this. I think we need to understand that that's not a reasonable ask, and that you manage and you have to make compromises. You
So
cannot.
what, so is there any particular sort of advice that you would like to give to young women who are entering a male-dominated field like finance, like technology? There's so many fields where men are
Yes.
predominant there. Is there
Yes.
any particular advice that you would like to give them?
Well, I think one of them should be that um, obviously they're the obvious ones. You must work hard, which everyone has to do. And you should, I think, most of all, remain a woman. This is talking about young women. There is no need to turn into a man or try to. Women try to do that sometimes. So, in any society, men are used to talking in a certain way or certain language, right? Just with men on their own. Some women will try to emulate that. That there is no need to do that. You have to be true to yourself and to whatever cultural norms exist. So I think that they should remain a woman, but on competence, they should be able to speak out. You know, it's hard for women to speak out, particularly in a. If you notice, men, when you're in a room and you're talking as a woman, the man starts speaking a bit louder. It's just so that I'm not in a bad way, but so you have to be able to speak out, or you can be silent, listen, and then come up with a point which will then you know restore the
Absolutely. Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
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 So I think that's what you have to do, and you have to really ensure that you are respected and that no one crosses lines. No one. That's important.
Correct. Yeah. That's
And
very
you learn
important.
that. And for young women, that is a challenge that they do face. There's no doubt about that. Again, you have to conduct yourself in a way that, and I'm maybe going to be a bit conservative like that. But for example, when I go to certain parts of the country, and I've been to Bartan or everywhere, then I will wear a chadar. I will cover my head, because that's the way that they will get comfortable, and then it's to respect their values. You must always respect that, and that I think is very important, very important. So you must respect everyone's values and not try to impose yours on them, and you expect them, and then you get the respect. So I think that's very important for
So
for
has there
young women.
been a any particular significant barrier that you've faced in your career that you can think of? I mean, there might be none, but if there was, would you like to talk about it?
The barrier that now let me try and think about it. I think the barrier to, in some ways, has been my own self.
Okay.
I don't think, and I've been fortunate, and God has been kind, and I think more fortunate than I deserve. And I think I've got so many opportunities, one after the other, really. And a lot of that, I often wonder how I got them. So the barrier I faced is possibly in many ways, and still to some degree, it's
I lost you there in between. I think if you can start
the
from the
barrier,
last one.
yes, it was that I sometimes am less confident than I should be. So I still believe that even now I should maybe speak up a little bit more. I think that's important. And that's so the barriers, I think, mostly for women are within themselves. Although, of course, society and men and everywhere in the world, it's not just Pakistan, anywhere, presents them with challenges. But I think this women, that lady who wrote on that Facebook that we sometimes just underplay ourselves.
Yeah.
And we the confidence to be ourselves, get away from, I should look like this, I should dress like this. But it takes time. As you grow older, you get that. As you're younger, all of these, these things bother you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you had to say that there was one thing that you consider your greatest achievement as a leader, what would that be? And don't be humble.
I think that all the people that I have worked with, and even if I've had to be hard on them, because as a leader, you have to be very hard sometimes. You even have to let people go sometimes. It's a very difficult thing. I think that most people have respected me at the end of it all, and they have felt that I've been fair. So I think if you're perceived as a fair leader and people respect you, then I think that I think being my achievement, I would like to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as the only woman heading a private sector lender in Pakistan, and one of the very few women heading companies in the country, you are actually changing the narrative around women empowerment every day. Does it sometimes become burdensome?
At times, burdensome in the sense that you don't want to be somewhere just because you're a woman, right?
Correct.
You achieved whatever you've achieved it, or there are other women who achieved it on their merit against men. But because women obviously don't achieve as much, you do get called upon to be the spokesperson. It's sometimes you wish that there were more, right? On the other hand, it's also a responsibility. So I think it would be very ungrateful, really, to think of it as a burden. It's a responsibility. So I think that is why, I always try to accept all ways of talking about these issues, because hopefully it will encourage other women. And I see them even in banking. And hopefully with our new framework that we're coming up with the State Bank on banking on equality, that will increase very much.
Absolutely.
We hope so.
Absolutely.
They're mandating it now.
Yeah, but it will take, as I think we've talked about this before, that it will take a bit of time because it involves behavior change and yeah. But at least you've started it, and that's a big thing.
And sometimes when behavior change is slow and you try to, okay, I'm going to push it a little bit through force or through at the State Bank, our position as a regulator, it just speeds it up.
Yeah.
And that
helps. Yeah. No, it's needed. So do you think we're, as a country, headed in the right direction in terms of providing equal opportunities to educated women and filling the economic gender gap?
I think the direction is right. I think in most parts, the will is also there. So that's important. And I think it's the speed which is the issue. It's the awareness that's the issue. And there's some fundamental issues in education is a big issue, and more so for women. How many girls can go to schools? Those kinds of issues. And in this modern age, real cell phone ownership, those are issues that we have to overcome. And those are, and even now, honestly, I have to tell people that you've got vaccinated in the desiccated income groups, for example. You've got vaccinated. Did you get your wife or your mother or your sister? And I have seen puzzlement, So those things, education. And then there's responsibility on those of us who can assist to do that. But I think, yes, there's a lot to do, but I think the direction is right. I think the direction is right.
And as organizations, so you've told us what's happening as far as the state bank is concerned and what the banking on equality initiative is. But other than banking as well, in other organizations, we face the same kind of problems. Is there something that we can collectively do to fix the way that women are perceived and the way that they grow as leaders within organizations?
Yes, I mean, I think they're progressive organizations, obviously, and they are. I feel that they're moving beyond lip service. I think the biggest barrier is lip service, saying it and not meaning it. That we must encourage women in the workforce and we must give them opportunities and all of that. I think in the middle corporate side we do need to work, and I think that can only be done through people like you and myself and organizationally as well, through interaction, and also then by talking to young women, actually talking to women in colleges and universities, without telling them there is a choice, without saying that okay, being a homemaker is something wrong. It's not. It's a choice. No, it's an absolute choice, and it should be there. But if you wish to do something, then this is how you can do it. And then in each organization, whoever we interact with, we need to be mentoring people. And then working on a larger scale with governments and so on. And I think they are certainly willing to listen. Certainly willing to listen.
Right. So now moving into what's happening right now, about the post-COVID era, with work from home becoming a norm, women, especially working mothers, have found the lines of working hours and personal hours to be a bit blurred. Do you think this will make it even harder for them to get to leadership positions?
It may. I wonder, I almost wonder whether in work environments like Pakistan, whether work from home will become so much of a norm or not. I'm wondering. Even now, there is a preference for people coming back to the office, and they're also more comfortable coming back to office. I think men and women, because the way that our society is and income groups are, people live in small apartments. They cannot work. It's just not practical. And so I don't know how much of that will actually change, but I think it'll be good, and we'll be working on some initiatives to try and give that option, or have flexi hours and things like that, which will assist women particularly. But I think it's not going to be such a dramatic change, and that's maybe just my view. Perhaps more in the West than here.
Okay. So as we sort of get to the tail end of our talk, where will we find you on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m., for instance? Do you work Saturdays, by the way?
No, I don't. Sometimes.
Okay. So where would we find you on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m.?
Okay, I'll probably be at home, and I will then I'll go and have my hair done or something after that.
Okay.
I'll get a manicure. That's what I tend to do. Or I'll go to the shops. I might go to the supermarket. We are having we're doing some work in the kitchen, I may go and do a little bit of that, right? Or I may just be lying in bed reading a book. So that's what I would do on a Saturday morning, really.
And
Especially
what does Sima Kamil do for fun?
for fun. For fun, I spend time with my husband. And we watch movies together. We cook together. He likes to cook, actually. I'm the one who I will kind of sit there and either talk to him or chop a few things, So we will do that. And then we, over time, our own social circle, particularly with COVID, I think is kind of narrowed. So we will only meet now with a few friends. That's what we would do. And we're not that keen on a lot of parties and shadis and that thing. And I think actually it's been one of the reliefs of COVID as far as I'm concerned. Because such long hours, and then the state bank is really long hours, it's quite good to just be able to chill, actually. So that's what, yeah.
Okay. That sounds like fun.
It is fun. It is fun. I enjoy it very much. And if I can travel, and then life would be perfect. Because I like to go to different countries.
You've already told us that you're an avid reader, and reading was one of the things that you did even while growing up. So would you like to share what is the last thing you read? And is there any particular book that you've read that you think
at the moment
I
used to read a lot of British or shall we say Asian writers, some of them. And another one I love is Marquez. So The 100 Years of Solitude, that kind of book. Yeah. And I've been reading.
But that's not everybody's game, right? That's not it. Many people wouldn't enjoy that. Yeah.
I only read fiction. I don't read any non-fiction.
Okay. All right.
I don't read any management books, economics books, or banking books. No.
Okay. Fiction. Now that's a surprise.
Yes. I don't read any of those because books allow you to enter into another world in your head. Nothing to do with and then that's real relaxation. Unfortunately, now the only thing I ever read is sometimes The Economist, which I like. I like the way they write. But other than that, I don't read any self-improvement books or any of those things.
So which was the last book you read?
The last book I read was one of Graham Greene, and it was called The Power and the Glory.
And would you recommend that to people who are watching?
I would. Okay. But I have a batch of books and I kind of pitch into them, but there's no time. That's the sad thing. If you get home at 8 and then you have another Zoom call, then it's Zoom has kind of made you 24/7.
Yes, that's one of the unfortunate things that Zoom has done. Is that you can't even say, no, I'm not available, because you are actually available wherever you are.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Well, it's wonderful talking to you and learning more about you and what you've done and how you've gotten to where you are. And I hope a number of young women who are watching you will be inspired. I'm sure they will be into following, what you've done and achieving maybe some of what you've achieved. Maybe some of them will achieve way more.
Way more, I hope so.
Yeah, because this country needs many more women leaders, right? So I think you would be only too happy to see them achieve much more.
Of course. I definitely.
Thank you so much, Sima. I know that your husband is waiting for you.
Thank you.
And you take the time to talk to us.
Not at all. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Jahara. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.